right, gentlemen, welcome to Bagel Talk. We have your host, Joe Pontillo, and today's guest, the author of Food Americana, which is a great book. I read it, and I'm going to turn it over to Joe Pontillo and David Page. Go ahead, Joe.
Hey, welcome to a new episode of Bagel Talk. I'm your host, Joe Pontillo, and we're doing this virtually. What is this, April 2020? But yeah, thanks for being here and checking us out. I did not get my bagel delivered as was arranged before we record these, so we'll bring that up later.
My apologies.
We got a great guest today. This guy been in TV for a long time. Actually, one of the creators of, or the creator.
The creator, not one of. Good God, Joe, get it right.
He knows where Guy Fieri is kept when he's not on TV, and he wrote a great book called Food Americana. Please welcome our guest, David Page.
Thank you, gentlemen. A pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for being here with your illustrious fake books.
Yeah, pretty good, huh?
Which tricked me for a moment. So
yeah, until you see right there where it's kind of the books are. It looks like any background of a Kim Kardashian Photoshop.
Needs better lighting though, but yes, otherwise.
Yeah. I have 3 lights going.
It's never enough. And you've got sunlight coming in.
Yeah, and I got a dog under the desk. It's so homey.
Perfect. But yeah, I somehow got, I still have not had a bookshelf behind me in any Zoom thing I've done. The only bookshelf I have is too low, so I'd have to lie in front of it, and nobody wants that. So, but thank you so much for being here. Your book.
Thanks for inviting me.
Sure. Your book came out last year, from what I understand, right?
Yeah, it came out in May.
Okay, May.
Yeah.
And it's great. And
thank you.
So tell me about what possessed you to write it, other than the fact that you've been around food for so many years at this point.
I've always been a career shapeshifter. I mean, I was in broadcasting for 50 years. But it was a sequence of different jobs. I mean, you're identified as what you are. So I was a local reporter. I was an investigative reporter. Then I was a foreign journalist. Then I was a morning show guy. And finally, after I left network news and opened my own production company and was starving to death, I called a friend of mine, Al Roker, who, before he was on the main Today show, he was on the weekend show, which I co-produced. And he also had a production company. So I called him up and said, got any work for me? And he started having me do Food Network stuff for him. Then I got diners through the Food Network, and I ended up as a food journalist. And was still kind of itching to do something else. And frankly, all TV producers have inside them the deep-seated belief that they can write a book, because people don't respect writing for TV the way they respect writing prose, even though to some extent writing for TV is a lot harder, because you can't just sit down and start typing. It was a dark and stormy night, and then Oedipus killed his father. You have to structure your story based on the visuals and sound that you have recorded. So it's pretty tough to do it well. And every TV producer thinks, hell, I could do a book. And one day, finally, like the scene in Alien, it just popped out and said, damn it, do it. So I did it.
Well, that's great. Now, as somebody who toys with the idea here or there about writing a book about what I do, not that anybody would want it, but what was your process when it came to like coming up with ideas, structuring the book, all that stuff?
I first of all, the structure of the book is less interesting in the case of this book, because it's in essence an anthology. Right. Each chapter stands on its own. Each chapter is a food or foodway. So I did not face the need to have some sort of continuing through line other than the premise of the book. I got to that by thinking about what in the world of food interests me based on my experiences. I really developed an appreciation for food when I was sent overseas unexpectedly by NBC, where I lived for a number of years as a producer. And having never expected to go overseas, I really didn't know jack. Can I swear on this one?
Of
No?
course.
Okay. I didn't know jack shit about the rest of the world. And as I went from country to country, one of the things I realized was that food is kind of a gateway to culture. And it set fire to my increasing interest in analyzing food beyond the joy of eating it, but in terms of what it represents. I mean, in Paris, you have a sit-down lunch because that's the way the Parisians traditionally approach life. In Strasbourg, in France, the local dish is choucroute, which looks like it should be across the border in Germany because it's a hunk of sauerkraut topped with hunks of pork and sausage. But it's an insight into the fact that in that part of Europe, the border kept changing. France and Germany kept switching ownership of that area. And there are, examples that go on forever, but that's the thinking that came with me when I came back to the States. And approaching food in America the way I approach food in Europe, I started to wonder, do we have a cuisine? You talk to folks on your trip around the world, and their view of American cuisine is McDonald's or Burger King. And frankly, if you ask many Americans what our cuisine is, that would be their answer. But the fact is, upon investigation, we created a very viable cuisine of our own by taking bits and pieces of other countries and cultures' cuisines, and then, and this is important, modifying and evolving them to our tastes and ingredients. And that became the book.
Right. And yeah, so the book is basically about American cuisine, which, like you said, if you bring that up to somebody, they'll be like, Wendy's, but they're wrong. And it's so much, it's as if we took all the cuisines from all the countries in the world, put them almost in different spots of our country, and then made them our own thing, which is kind of insane. And
But it's
yeah.
not insane, and it does open, lots of people are quote foodies these days.
Right.
And they love to have the authenticity discussion. Well, that's not authentic Chinese food. Well, yeah, it's not what they eat in China, but it is authentic Chinese American food as it evolved from the California gold rush of the 1800s, when people from Canton came here, some to be gold miners, some to operate restaurants and stores to serve them. And when it became obvious that Americans might try some of this, but not most of what the Chinese ate at home, the cuisine began to get modified. And I got to tell you, General Chow's chicken, for example, and there's a great documentary on this, In Search of General Chow, that was done by Jennifer Eight Lee, that is phenomenal. But the point of fact is, General Chow's chicken was invented in Taiwan as a kind of spicy dish of chicken on the bone. The Chinese gastronomic culture likes things on the bone. Here, it's turned into this sticky, sweet, boneless thing that I adore. I know I'm not eating the food of China when I eat it, but it's fantastic. And now, at the same time, there's a lot to be said for finding and trying original cuisines. I mean, go to Flushing, Queens, where I was born in New York, which is now almost entirely Asian, and go to the food hall I was taken to there. You can eat all sorts of food as eaten in China. Although, food everywhere evolves. In China right now, one of the most popular dishes among younger people is scrambled eggs and tomatoes, which
You know,
our foodie would probably not think of when he complains that this isn't authentic.
right. This isn't right. Well, I have to say, I love your origin story of how you started in news and then ended up doing your own thing, which then got you onto the Food Network. I feel like that normally goes in reverse. You start doing your own thing and then you get sucked up by like a major news corporation. So if I can ask, how did diners, drive-ins, and dives come to be, if that's cool?
Sure. After working on projects for Al, we both realized I wasn't going to make serious money working for someone else. And now I had an entree to the Food Network. So I started pitching them projects on my own. And they were roundly rejected and rejected and rejected. The good news was, because it's hard to get in to pitch anybody, I at least had a receptive executive on the other end of the phone. She was willing to take my calls, even if she always said no. Now, at Roker, I had done a history of diners for them through Roker. And finally, I'm on the phone with this woman one day, late in the afternoon, a Thursday or Friday, in my little basement office in my house in Minnesota. Why I was in Minnesota is another story. Don't ask anyway. Finally, to try to help me, I think, because I think at this point she pitied me, she said, "Don't you have anything about diners?" And I said, "Oh, absolutely. I'm developing this show called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives." And I told her all about it. And for the first time, she said, "Well, that sounds good. Prepare a one sheet, a write-up of the show. We have a meeting on Tuesday, a development meeting, and I'll present a pitch for a 1-hour special." And I got off the phone sort of conflicted, because on the one hand, she'd finally agreed to consider something. On the other hand, I had just made the damn name up. I was not developing something called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. I just pulled it out of thin air. I completely BS'd my description of what the show was. And now I had the weekend
It does
make
sound
a
like something
show
you
out of
made
it.
up on the spot.
You know, so I called all around the country. Back then, people used phones to actually talk to people. You didn't text. And I did a write-up, and I sent it in on Monday. They had their meeting Tuesday. Shortly thereafter, they commissioned a special. The idea being, as I kind of figured it out over time, Guy had won their Food Network Star Contest. Back then, they believed that the contest really would create their next generation of stars. In fact, he's the only one to have ever come out of it and gone on to big things. But they wanted to keep him in front of the public, so they were looking to create a primetime show for him. And they asked a couple of big deal production companies, guys with hundreds of employees and very important, to pitch stuff. And after my special got really good numbers, to their surprise, they received the pitches from these production companies and looked at them and thought, this is dreck. So almost out of desperation, because they had nothing, in the hopper, they commissioned a short first season of Diners. And after the first 2 or 3 episodes rated very well, they tamped down my expectations by telling me, look, this is good, but we don't think this show has at most more than 2, maybe 3 seasons in it, because there just aren't that many restaurants you can go to. And I left
seasons later.
Yeah, I left after season 11. They're now in season 30 something. So
yeah.
But that's the diner story.
That's a great story. Yeah, it's one of those shows like you can just watch endlessly, even if it's food you don't enjoy eating, you just enjoy the process.
Also, it's very comfortable white noise. I don't for a second diminish the reality that you can watch this show without having to focus on it for every second and still get your quota of entertainment and enjoyment. And TV, when you boil it all down, is about spending, successful TV is about giving the audience an opportunity to spend time with someone they like. That's why Tom Selleck is in his latest successful incarnation of a series. That's why Tyne Daly, unbeknownst to most people, was declared at one point by TV Guide the most successful female television actress ever. That's why James Garner was so. There are people you just want to hang out with, and that indefinable quality comes through the screen, and Guy has that.
Yeah, it's Guy Fieri, or it's one of the ghost hunting shows that you.
I mean,
watch. So getting back to the book, what was your favorite section to work on?
To work on or to produce? Well, my favorite section to work on was barbecue. But that's because I went to Memphis in May, considered by many to be the Super Bowl barbecue competition. And thanks to diners, I had an incredible way to report on it as a fly on the wall. When I was preparing to go, I looked at past winners and realized that the Shed in Mississippi was a two-time grand champion, and they were going back this year. Well, I had put the Shed on diners in one of the early seasons, might have been season 2. So I called down there and said, hey, can I make you my home base? Can I use your story as the spine for this chapter? And they said, come on down. So it was convivial, it was jovial. I had an in with everybody because I got the hechsha from the guys at the Shed, which means if you're not of the tribe, the approval that the food is kosher. And that's always good to have when you're doing whole hog barbecue, which I also had the best barbecue of my life. In terms of moments that moved me, I got to meet and spend some time in her apartment in San Francisco with the then 100-year-old Cecilia Chang, who was probably, she has since passed, she was the most influential single person in the development of Chinese food in America. Her Mandarin restaurant in San Francisco opened in 1960 and began to show us the ways to include non-basic, non-Cantonese dishes in what was this growing Chinese American food genre. I loved going to pizza school in San Francisco with Tony Gemignani. And I absolutely adored, bringing this full circle, everything I experienced in my chapter on bagels and lox. I got to hang out with the folks at Russ and Daughters, which is 100 and blah, blah years old on the Lower East Side of New York. And they were just so wonderful. They let me get behind the counter and attempt to slice lox, which turned into a pile of mush, but they were just great. And look, I am as culturally New York Jewish as it gets, okay? My death row meal is lox and bagels. I go to I have different combinations of salmon and bagels based on what kind of salmon it is. In other words, with regular Nova, I'm an everything bagel guy. But with belly lox, which is so salty, I'm a plain bagel guy, because you can't, all of those flavors together with the salt from the belly lox will kill you. It doesn't matter how much cream cheese you put on, because it's all about, as with any kind of food, in my mind, it's about balance, the right amount of each component. It's like I did a chapter that included lobster rolls, and there's you can get a lobster roll anywhere today, which you can debate whether I grew up in Western Mass. Our summer vacations, we ate lobsters on the wharf in Maine. So I feel strongly about lobster. One of the things I feel strongly about is that in this society where bigger is better, where the Cheesecake Factory, gives you 2 weeks worth of food on a plate, and that's their selling point, even though food costs are the lowest on the totem pole of restaurant costs. I hate the lobster roll that comes with all of this lobster piled on top of it. Not that I don't like lobster, but if I ordered a lobster roll, I am looking for the balance between the butter toast on that New England bun and the right amount of lobster meat prepared the way I like it with very little mayonnaise. But the point is, a lobster roll is a balancing act. A good lox bagel and cream cheese any food is a balancing act. And
Yeah.
I've gotten into this tangent about how we Americans just think more food. And look, I'm overweight. I love my food. I'm not complaining about having plenty of it, but I'm troubled that more has passed best as the standard.
Yeah.
I didn't like H&H Bagels because they took what was supposed to be a relatively small item and they puffed it up for no reason. And, I
A
don't
bagel
want
needs to be a certain size.
yeah, well, I don't want this to sound sexist, but when I was first married, I hung around my wife and her girlfriends, and all of these other New York Jewish women who were single and all watching their weight would always scoop out the bagel.
Right.
And I say that because I was like one of the crowd. I was considered female, so I got to watch all these rituals. But why buy? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm deeply offended by this.
That's I would be offended too. So no worries there. Yeah, that's it's interesting that you say that. Yeah, I feel like a lot of things, like it's almost as if we've adapted family style for everything, even though it's not. Like, hey,
Yeah, but then you eat everything that's on the table for the rest of the family.
exactly. So I can't stop it. So you answered your question about bagels. That's usually a question we ask, what your favorite bagel type is.
These days, and I don't live in New York anymore, but I do come in because my wife and I go in because our daughter lives on the Upper West Side, which generally sends me to Barney Greengrass as opposed to Russ and Daughters because of location. I call Barney Greengrass from the Lincoln Tunnel, and Gary Greengrass gets my order ready, and I have a credit card on file. Anyway, of the various bagels I have recently tried in New York, I'm partial to Russ and Daughters now that they're making their own at the Navy Yard facility in Brooklyn.
Oh, okay.
I have not. Where I want to go is Kosar's because my grandfather used to take me there. We used to walk there. He lived on the Lower East Side to get bialys. And I am told that in their remade, I mean, they've been bought and made over, and now they do bagels. And I've read both good and bad about them. I just hope they didn't mess up the bialys.
It's always a concern. What's your favorite bagel topping?
Oh, it's you mean in the sandwich or on the?
Yeah, like everything, poppy, sesame.
My favorite these days is an everything bagel with Nova and cream cheese. I like onion. I'll even take a little tomato if it's forced on me, but I don't like one of those things, the little things that look like rabbit droppings.
Capers?
Right.
Capers?
Capers. I'm not
Maybe.
a capers guy. I think it fights the whole thing.
Yeah, it looks healthy, but you're also not sure.
Yeah, it's just it doesn't belong there.
I didn't ask for it.
I went to Acme, the smoked fish giant.
Oh yeah.
To their facility in Brooklyn, and most of their stuff isn't actually done there. Most of their stuff's done in North Carolina, but in Brooklyn they still provide I mean, they produce some for sale in supermarkets and such, but that's also where they do the special orders for Zabar's and Greengrass and Russ and Daughters and Kenny and Ziggy's in Houston, which is run by an expat New York Jew. But anyway, they gave me some belly locks right off the line. Oh, that's to die for. I'm telling
That's power, right?
you. It's funny though, because belly locks was the first locks, because locks was invented when the Transcontinental Railroad was completed, and it was now possible to bring salmon from Washington State to the East Coast. But before refrigeration, they packed it in salt to preserve it. And it was that salt-packed salmon that became locks. But what's interesting, that's a veteran broadcaster hits the mic. I remember my grandmother on my father's side, who was pretty pretentious, as my grandfather would go out the door to go to the appetizing store, yelling, "Get the Novi," because apparently Nova was an upgrade from locks. And if you were going to be socially mobile, you had to move to Nova. Get the Novi.
It's what we're doing now. Let's go. So I know we joked about this a little before, but if someone asked you what was like the American meal, what would you say? Or the American food? Sushi. These days,
among the younger generation, that's the go-to. That's lunch. That's as a top executive at the largest producer of prepared takeout sushi in America told me. She said, when I was in school, if my girlfriends and I snuck out for lunch, it was burgers. For my kids, it's sushi.
Huh. Yeah, I would probably say sushi, or maybe even, Mexican food, like tacos. I feel
but see, sushi is easily defined Mexican food, even though there's a broad Mexican American category. It can differ. Tex-Mex is not Cal-Mex. So your favorite Mexican American dish can be severely influenced by where you live, or more importantly, where you grew up. Sushi. I mean, yes, it's done a million different ways, and it's usually, again, not the sushi as served in Japan, but it's become an American standard. And by that, I mean sushi rolls.
Right.
Yeah.
Not the other ones. Yeah, because with Mexican, it's like some places do ground beef, other places don't believe in ground beef. It's
crispy tacos, soft tacos, flour, wheat, you know. Sour cream, that's the Texas favorite.
Very true. So, all right. I guess we got to wrap this up, but this was fantastic. I wish I could talk to you a lot more, actually, but apparently we only paid for 30 minutes of Zoom.
Well, there's no money in the hole in the bagel, so you got to do what you can do.
And by far, I have to say, I think you are by far the most famous person we've had on the show, next to the Pickle Man.
Boy, did you get the real guy or Peter Rieger?
Actually, he's just a guy who has a pickle store in the East Village. But
well, you're young. Have you seen Crossing Delancey?
I've not. No.
Oh, come on! It's the ultimate pickle love story. Go for it.
It's a movie. Okay.
It's phenomenal. It's Peter Rieger and I think Amy Irving. And
yes, it is.
Yeah, it's just a delight. Especially, look, as I said, my grandparents were on the Lower East Side. I kind of hung around that area when Orchard Street was Orchard Street. But you go look at it, okay? And then let me know when you're doing stand-up. I want to come see you. And thanks for having me, by the way.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. This was a great talk. And yeah, I guess. And where can we find the book? I know it's on Amazon.
Amazon's the best place to go, frankly, because they keep the metrics that are of the most use to me trying to sell the book. You can get it anywhere else: Target, Walmart, Barnes and Noble. It's everywhere. but Amazon is the simple answer.
All right, great. So if you're watching this, please go check out Food Americana on Amazon or at a bookstore. Tell them Joe Pontillo sent you. They'll probably charge you more for some reason, but please do it.
And poor Joe, if I'm about the most famous person you've ever interviewed, you guys have to get to work on this podcast.
Well, we're raising the bar now.
Okay, fine.
You're like the Nova of guests that we've had.
No, I'm the Belly Lux. You're looking for Nova.
All right, David, thank you so much. And do you have a website or something people could check out?
Well, I've got Instagram and Facebook Food Americana accounts. Go there. I post stuff.
All right, terrific.